All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is our notes for August 31st to September 4th. It's not going to be a lot here just because it's only 2 days that we're spending in class total. So I just want to go through this whole Gilded Age in terms of why it's called the Gilded Age and going through why it's not the golden age of American history. So the Gilded Age is essentially a time period in American history that reviews the American government, the people, the economy. It goes through this time it looks extremely shiny on the outside. We're making the most money we've ever made before. You have people like Morgan, get this up here. Yeah, Morgan, Carnegie, Vanderbilt, Carnegie, and Rockefeller trying to make the most money they could possibly make. And industry boomed. The economy was soaring. Everything was great. People wanted to buy American-made goods all around the world. So, the United States became an economic powerhouse during this time period, which makes us look great. However, on the inside, there are some major issues going on in the United States. So the term gilded, which means, and a synonym for that is gold-plated, means that you have this entirety of the country that looks great from the outside, but you go inside and you actually live in it, and it's not the best place. Unless you're one of the guys on the screen, of course, right here. But to compare their wealth, you look at the bottom numbers, that's what their money would be inflated to today. If you look at the times, their dates of these numbers on the top numbers are different. So that's why the rates of inflation change. It's like Cornelius Vanderbilt, second from the left there. He was a business tycoon and a business industrialist with railroads. Slightly after the Civil War, when after the Civil War was over, the Transcontinental Railroad was finished, and he pretty much owned almost every single piece of railway that existed as a monopoly, and he accumulated mass sums of wealth as a result. But it was significantly before Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Morgan. So that's why you see his number for inflation up. To compare their wealths, the bottom numbers to today's wealthiest man is Jeff Bezos, who is accumulated his wealth to $200 million. Now, some of you that saw this slide on Friday, I'm going to continue here again, but you can take these notes, but I just want to show you kind of how these men really dealt with the time period they were in. They were extremely wealthy, and they kept it all to themselves. All right. So these men, by keeping it all to themselves, meant they took advantage of the lower classes to make their fortunes. You're looking at lower classes, people in poverty, possibly immigrants coming to the country trying to find work. They worked very long hours for very little pay. The only day off they got was Sunday. And every other day after that, they worked 10 to 12 hours per day. And they're not talking like sitting on a conveyor belt doing this, same thing over again. You're talking really hard labor, backbreaking work for 10 to 12 hours a day and only having one day off. All right. The politics in the U.S. government allowed this to happen. And again, politicians are not seeing this happen and allowing it. They're just keeping a hands-off approach. They don't really know it's happening. All right. Many people in Jefferson's time, Jefferson believed in this. Now, he did not assume that the industry would get this big, but he believed the government should have a hands-off approach, that it should not have this, it should not have its hand in the pockets of the businesses, should not have its hands in the pockets of the people. Government should take a hands-off approach against business, so they don't have to, control them a whole lot. If you don't control businesses, they can make more money, and if they make more money, then possibly you can tax those businesses more. That's kind of the whole laissez-faire approach. All right, less regulations means more money. However, with less regulations means obviously what you see above that is that lower classes get taken advantage of. All right. So politicians oftentimes, if they did know about these things, and very few did, many of them would look the other way on business and market dealings. They would be told, hey, we're going to, take the market this direction, and the politicians would put the money in and make tons of money. They would get payoffs from these business leaders so they could do something illegal. They could dump something somewhere. They could increase air pollution. They could work children longer. Whatever it was, they were paid more money. These politicians were paid by the businesses to look the other way. All right. And while these things are going on, media outlets are also kept quiet. So if the media comes forward and says, you know how journalists work, they like to find what's wrong in the country and try to make people aware of that. Well, these businesses also kept media outlets quiet as well. So everything was hush hush. A very corrupt system we're living at this point. And again, it only benefits those at the top. All right. And it got so bad that each of those three individuals here in the picture with Morgan at the top, Carnegie, and Rockefeller at the bottom, they try to buy a president and they succeed. All right. There is a candidate that comes forward from the Populist Party, but he's nominated by the Democrats. His name is William Jennings Bryan, and he sees the injustice of or the inequality of wealth that's going on in this country, and he wants to change that. And that's a big threat to these businesses. These guys that are making their fortunes, and they're pretty much doing it at the hands and almost in the graves of people. They're killing people just to make their fortunes. Now they're not physically murdering people, but based on the work they're doing, they're dying. So this candidate, William Jennings Bryan, comes forward and he's a threat, and he's getting a lot of support from the West, from parts of the South. And these business tycoons need to find a candidate that will support them. So they pick William McKinley. They don't let really Republicans choose it. They put the money ahead and tell the Republican convention that you're going to pick this guy and this is final. And then once he is selected as a Republican nominee, they put $10 million into his campaign, which could be upwards to around, a couple $1 billion today. All right, this is a lot for a campaign at this time, and they throw money towards McKinley, and they also coerce people when the polls open. We'll go into some of this if you're in class with me about what was going on there. But they supported the wealth, they supported businesses. They also McKinley, that's who I'm referring to, supported the laissez-faire, the hands-off approach. All right, so. Can we relate to this, with our time as it is? They had unlimited wealth to persuade people to vote for the candidate of their choice. All right. They financed the campaigns and they paid off the media outlets, only posting pro-McKinley headlines and posting William Jennings Bryan headlines that were negative. So these are really what's driving American politics at this time, is the businesses. They accumulate the wealth, they can pay off whoever they want to, and then they have the option to pick their candidate. All right, and McKinley wins. He actually wins not one term, but he wins a second term as well under the same financing. So this is really what's happening here. And as voting happens in 1896, the first election that we see McKinley on the ticket, voting at this time is a very public act. So not only would McKinley fund the elections, get the elections funded, from the titans of industry, but the big business leaders would send their foremen to the polls. Every single poll they could go to, at least they knew where they had a lot of workers going to, and they would sit there. And at this time, voting is a very public act. There are boxes on each side of the room, one for each candidate. People would take their slip and put their slip literally into a box. And if you put it in the wrong person's box, according to the foreman looking at you, you could get fired as a result of that. So some people were, coerced, not physically coerced, but they were coerced nonetheless, because if you didn't put it in the right candidate, you might not have a job the next day, which many people would not be able to afford to do. They couldn't afford the job anyway, having it, but they definitely couldn't afford not making any money. So this is how they really coerced a lot of people to get their way. And three guys persuaded an entire country to, vote one way in an election, almost an entire country. All right. Now this is how, this is relatable. All right. I'm not saying it happens today, but we see how much money is thrown into campaigns, and the amount of money that we see today is able to help buy candidates. It helps them to think a certain way on certain policies and so forth. All right. Now, when we look at the corruption, as people get into political office, not just at the federal level where McKinley's getting elected, but the local levels, you have people going in positions they don't deserve to be in, or they don't have the education, they don't have the skill set. They're just there because they know somebody, not because of what they know. So that's what's called the spoil system. And it's in the White House, it's in every single level of government, because they want to make sure they get their people into certain jobs. So the Pendleton Civil Service Act comes forward to help create a interview or a vetting process for people to be taking up positions in a cabinet. So government jobs, for a cabinet, for a city council member, someone who works for, not really someone who's elected, but someone who works for that elected official. If you're an advisor, it's no longer about who you know, it's about what you know. All right. This is the level of political corruption they're dealing with here. All right. This is just a brief overview here. We're going to read some articles in class this week. I've posted those articles up on Canvas. So please, please, please take a look at those. And I also have some John Green videos up that help maybe to, give a more general approach to this whole Gilded Age. Okay. Thank you very much. I will see you all in class next week. If I don't see you next week, I will see you in the Friday Zoom meetings. Have a great night.